I'm gonna take a wild guess and assume that you clicked on this video because you're either about to start riding a motorcycle or you just started riding. Congratulations, that means you are at the highest risk level on two wheels. Not to worry though, getting obliterated while riding your bike, or exiting the chat as the kids would say, is not all that common. And in fact, there's several things you can do right now to prevent having issues on your motorcycle. I'm going to give you a no-nonsense guide to staying alive on your bike, because it's all about knowing when and where you're most at risk and how to prevent disaster. There's millions of riders all around the world who have successfully ridden a bike for decades without any issue, and they all share certain attributes and traits. And today, you're going to learn some of those. Before we jump in, I wanted to do a quick note about gear. I'm talking about your helmet, jacket, gloves, boots, and some riding jeans, and maybe an airbag if you're feeling zesty. I'm going to assume that you're wearing as much gear as you're comfortable with, because at the end of the day, wearing gear does not necessarily prevent death. Bad decision making on your motorcycle will cause injury and death, and gear is there as more of an insurance policy to help mitigate damage should it happen. So be smart, wear a helmet and some gear. In fact, that's actually the easiest way to prevent death, just wear a helmet. Most guys who die on a bike in the United States do so simply because they weren't wearing a helmet. So let's think about what would cause serious injury or death on a bike. It's when you're coming into contact with fixed objects or subjecting yourself to a sudden amount of force, like getting rear-ended. Suddenly slowing down wreaks havoc on the body, and there's quite a few common traffic patterns where this can happen. Let's think about the most common culprit: drivers turning left in front of you. In the US, we have a ton of stroads. These are places where there's fast-moving traffic on suburban streets and around suburban areas. In general, these are dangerous places because there's a ton of intersections and opportunities for people to jump out in front of you while you're on your motorcycle. Here's a fun fact for you: non-interstate arterial roads in city and suburban settings account for a disproportionate number of deaths because of high traffic density and frequent turning by cars. That's why it's critically important that when you're in areas like this with a lot of traffic, intersections, pullouts from strip malls or shopping centers, you gotta be hyper vigilant. In two vehicle fatal crashes, 42% of the time, the other vehicle turned left directly in front of the motorcycle while the bike was going straight, passing, or overtaking. Drivers failing to notice oncoming motorcycles at intersections or when making turns is one of the single deadliest scenarios in riding. You gotta put yourself in a visible position, keep the speeds lower, and assume that everyone is about to jump out in front of you, and keep your fingers covering that front brake. It may all seem a little overwhelming now, but in time, you'll build the skill sets and muscle memory to avoid most instances when in situations like this. Keeping your distance, staying focused, covering the brakes, staying in a good spot in the lane, eventually all those skills will compound and you'll be a safer rider. But for now, as you start out with motorcycling, places like this will be the most dangerous to you. You should approach every intersection with caution, regardless if you have the green or not, especially if you're leaving the intersection after a red light and you're first in line. Getting T-boned at an intersection as a motorcycle rider is an extremely bad outcome. And this brings me to another very important point, an issue I see over and over again on social media: the right-of-way. This might be my hot take for the video, but in motorcycling, there is no right-of-way. They're simply just clear to go. Because in nearly every circumstance, if someone violates your right-of-way, you're gonna lose. Motorcycles are small, you're totally exposed, and going up against even the smallest of compact cars is gonna end in disaster for you, let alone if you go up against a lifted F-150. You need to rewire your brain to completely forget the idea of right-of-way. All you're really looking for is clear to go. So the light turns green, you have the right-of-way, you can go immediately, right? No. You gotta scan the intersection and make damn sure that you're clear to go. Forget the right-of-way. Even if that ends up taking a few extra seconds, I'd rather be sure before I go. Even before the light turns green, I'm already scanning cars and verifying that no one's blasting through the intersection or doing anything crazy. Vision and predictive pattern analysis comes into play here. You gotta be able to think 3 or 4 steps ahead of traffic. The other common way riders get seriously hurt: getting rear-ended. Well, how do you prevent that, Yam? Drivers will just not hit the brakes and plow right into me. Don't give them the chance. If you find yourself in what I call a sitting duck position, get the hell out of there. Filter to the front where there's other cars already stopped. Stay off to the side of the lane so you can give yourself the chance to move. Being stuck in traffic and having a bunch of cars coming up from behind you is a very nervous position for a rider, so don't give anyone the chance. Make progress through cars because you're way better off getting sideswiped than getting rear-ended. Without a doubt, issues with cars and traffic are huge problems when it comes to injury and death on motorcycles, and with good habits and practice, you can mitigate most of those issues. But what if I told you that those crazy crash compilations you're watching, that awful news story you recently read about a rider dying because somebody rear-ended them, that those stories are kind of rare, and in reality, riders die more often than not all by themselves? Let's take some personal accountability and discuss the real reason riders are getting themselves killed. According to the NHTSA, that's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, alcohol involvement remains the single biggest predictor of a fatal motorcycle crash. It's honestly shocking that anyone would choose to ride a motorcycle while drunk, while we live in the age of driverless taxis and Ubers and Lyfts and stuff like that. I mean, think about it. Riding a motorcycle is an activity that requires coordination, balance, and judgment. That's three things that severely go out the window when you're drunk. I remember when I was about 23 years old, I went out to a bar with a few of my friends and a girl I was interested in. I rode my bike there because I wanted to look cool for the girl. It's a big cliche, I know. Up until that point, I had always ridden my bike stone cold sober, but come on, I'd driven my car after drinking a beer or two, and I thought it would be totally fine to ride a little bit buzzed. Needless to say, it was a pretty terrifying experience riding my motorcycle back home that night, and I wasn't even drunk. I'd only had about 2 beers. The sensation of leaning over, trying to use all the controls, it was such a bad experience and kind of scary. I vowed to myself after that night that if I had the keys to my bike and I was riding, alcohol would not enter the conversation. Bikes and alcohol are like oil and water. They do not mix at all. Get this, roughly 40% of riders killed in single vehicle accidents, meaning no other cars or traffic were involved, alcohol was a factor. And nighttime fatalities are almost 3 times more likely to involve alcohol than daytime. I mean, that kind of tells you the whole story, doesn't it? Want to make sure you don't die on your bike? Don't drink and ride at night, and you're already way ahead of the curve. Wear a helmet, and you're even more well off than the average rider. Let's address a big elephant in the room. That would be excessive speed. I've preached on this channel time and time again about how you need to pick your moments to enjoy your bike. You kiss that speed and then you bring it back down. Basically, let the bike eat a little bit when you're merging onto a highway and then just dial it back. In recent years, there has been a big trend online to post content where riders are speeding excessively. There's now quite a few infamous vloggers who are now facing serious legal problems due to posting crazy top speed runs, sometimes in broad daylight. Here's the thing. Motorcycles are fast, they're fun, but there's virtually no reason to go out and ride at sustained high speeds, and you should absolutely never hit high speeds in those aforementioned suburban areas with lots of traffic. I'm not going to name any names because I don't think it's really right to do so, but there's a handful of creators and influencers who post about how bikes are dangerous and don't ride them. And then I check their accounts and they're riding at triple the speed limit in a suburban area with traffic. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. I'm not really surprised to see that these riders ran into issues. The more you ride, the more you will find your pace. There is an enjoyable way to ride quickly, safely, in the right places at the right time. There's no reason to pump up the speed in traffic-dense areas. Speed plays a role in 33% of fatal motorcycle crashes compared to 22% for cars and light trucks. Going faster will increase the time and distance it takes to slow down and will make crashing hurt way worse. Rudimentary physics tells us that force is equal to mass times acceleration. The faster you go, the more force you're going to incur on your body. And as a side note, the other common issue is improper licensing. About 35% of riders involved in fatal crashes don't hold a valid license. But I would take this even further and say that many riders who fatally crash are not properly trained to ride a motorcycle. It's why I constantly implore you guys to take at least one advanced rider course, whether it's an ADV class, a track day school, or even the bog standard advanced MSF course that's offered. Getting more rider education is directly correlated to not getting seriously hurt or killed on your bike, or at least lowering that likelihood. Okay, but let's say you're still worried, or you know someone who's going to be riding and you're worried for them. I want to break these numbers down a little bit further for you on how common it really is to get killed on your motorcycle. If we look at the absolute risk of a rider getting killed from a per ride or even a per year view, the risk seems pretty low. There's 9.5 million registered motorcycle riders in the US, and about 6,200 of them die each year while riding. That means we have a 1 in 1,500 chance of dying, or about 0.066%, which sounds pretty good on paper. On a per ride risk basis, because active riders take so many trips, it means that in the aggregate on any given day, you have about a 1 in 1 million chance of dying. Hey, I'll take those chances all day long. But that doesn't really tell you the whole story. Statistics are a bit funny like that, because compared to driving a car, you're 28 times more likely to die in a crash per vehicle mile on a motorcycle. Yikes. Motorcycles account for just 0.6% of all vehicle miles traveled in the US and 3% of registered vehicles, yet motorcyclists account for 15% of all traffic fatalities nationwide. Yeah, that makes my stomach drop a little bit, to be honest. Statistically, rare events compound over time. While a 1 in 1,500 annual risk sounds pretty small in isolation, a dedicated motorcyclist riding over a 30-year lifespan faces a cumulative lifetime fatality risk of about 1 in 50, assuming average riding habits and baseline risk factors. I mean, me personally, I still think that's kind of a low risk. I think you're more likely to die by heart disease in this country. So that story's pretty clear. Ride more motorcycles, eat less cheeseburgers. However, that risk is not distributed evenly across all riders. Take, for example, a sober, fully geared rider who took formal safety courses, rides a bike with ABS, observes the speed limit pretty well. This rider's going to operate at a dramatically lower statistical risk profile than a rider who skips the gear, consumes alcohol before riding, and, rides a Turbo Hayabusa. And I think that's a good segue to the final point of my video for today. When it comes to rider safety, avoiding serious injury, and death on a motorcycle, you are the arbiter of your own fate. I feel like us more experienced motorcyclists tend to come to this conclusion that if something happened on your motorcycle, it was probably your own fault. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but even in those cases where a driver turned out in front of you or a deer randomly appeared on your favorite twisty road, there was probably something you could have been doing better to help you avoid the incident. Sure, sometimes there's acts of God, but they're extremely rare. The long and short of it is, if you want to avoid death or injury on your bike, simply follow these steps. Wear a helmet and get good gear. Never drink alcohol and ride. Have some rider training under your belt. Keep your speeds a little bit lower in dense traffic. Practice good habits and positioning in dense traffic, and ride during the daytime when possible. And be mindful of drivers turning left in front of you, because those are particularly dangerous. If you do all of these things consistently, you're way ahead of the curve in terms of being at risk for a life-altering injury or death on a motorcycle. I don't want to sugarcoat this. I don't think bikes are quite as dangerous as people make them out to seem. I just think that they're incredibly intolerant of mistakes and bad behavior. Because, if you think about it, who would jump on a motorcycle without wearing a helmet, buzzed up on alcohol, going out at night, riding really fast? You're asking for a bad time. At the end of the day, I want to get more people riding bikes, but I also want to make sure that you're staying safe. Motorcycles are known as what I like to call serious fun. It's a lot of fun to ride, but you must take it seriously. I've seen way too many riders on social media getting killed, having life-altering injuries, all from what seem to be extremely avoidable situations. And I speak about this because it comes from a place of experience. I used to be that type of rider, and I lived the consequences for it. I want to make an extra shout out to the young men watching this video, because you are the demographic which is at the highest risk. You're full of hubris, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, and you're just simply not quite there when it comes to motorcycling seriously. That's why it's super important that you stay with it, stay committed, stay focused, and stay safe on your bike. So what do you guys think? Is motorcycling as dangerous as people make it out to seem, or are none of us really getting out of this whole thing alive and we should just enjoy while we can? To the beginner riders and the soon-to-be riders out there, I hope this video assuaged some of your fears. Motorcycling is not nearly as dangerous as people think it is, as long as you follow some good steps and good habits. Thanks for checking out today's upload. I really do appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.